Something I've been thinking a lot about lately is toxic independence. Now, I know I've been sharing that I am someone who decided a long time ago that I never wanted to be vulnerable. I never wanted to need anything. I never wanted to ask for help for anything. I wanted people to think that I was doing fine and that everything was great. So for me, I longed for someone to see me, to ask me how I was, to check in, to know that I was worthy of helping, of loving, of noticing. But what I've realized is my behavior and my way of showing up in the world prevented people from doing that. I showed up like everything was great. So why would people ask me anything other than, like, how are you? Right? Like, and they're gonna get that automatic, everything's great response. So if everything's great, why would they keep asking me how everything was, right? I am someone who chooses to deflect and ask others how they're doing so that they don't ask me how I am. And what that led to for me was resentment. I wanted to know in relationships why no one was asking me how I was doing. It's a common courtesy, right? Like a back and forth relationship. You ask someone how they are, they should return the favor. But again, if they had asked, I would have given them some bullshit answer and nothing would have ever gone further anyway. So now that I'm further into my journey, I'm understanding this, but this is the thing I was going through. In social situations, I was focused on getting drunk and having fun and not really being in reality, if I'm being honest. So that led me to further feel disconnected from myself, from my feelings, because I didn't want to look at what was really going on. If I stopped to think about the things I was actually doing, it was depressing. How I was living my life was depressing. And then as a nurse, this was further cemented. I was terrified as a young nurse. And you want to know the quickest way to feel awful about yourself as a new nurse? Having a manic person tell you that they know that you don't know what you're doing and you're not in control. So I learned to show up and pretend like everything was fine yet again. And we're also told in psych, never let your guard down, never let them see any weaknesses. They take full advantage. Never share anything about your life because they will use that against you. And I learned that lesson for myself. The one time I had found a patient out was just, we got along really well. I shared with him that I was a fan of the band Tool. No big deal, right? Well, 2 seconds later, he was telling all the patients about it, and I was so embarrassed. So that sealed that. I never shared a personal thing about myself ever again. For years, anyway. So, again, solidifying the fact that I couldn't be authentic. And the other part of that is that because I am a hard worker, I did all the things and then I did more. And I didn't even really allow space for anybody else to do the extra work, right? The things that we should all be doing as a team. And of course, because I was working hard, I started to resent the people that I worked with, and I started to call them lazy. I loved being a martyr. I really did. I wanted people to like me because I was a hard worker, not realizing like nobody wins in that situation. But anyway, that's how I perceived it. And then as I went along in my nursing career, I kind of thought, working in a team isn't the best for me. It's not satisfying. Maybe I should try a job that I'm the only nurse. Then there's no one else to blame not getting the work done on. So I did. And at first, it was a great thing. I actually found a job I really loved. But then that program shut down. So what it really turned into, I don't like being the only nurse, because then there's no one else to help you with the workload, and it all gets on your shoulders. And if you leave something, it's still waiting there the next day. So that wasn't the right answer. But anyways, I continued to, follow this unhealthy pattern, blaming others for things that I was really in control of. And so this finally came to a head it was about 2 years ago. My father, who was fine one day, pretty much, he's, in his 70s, so he had some health issues, but generally in pretty good health. He needed to go to the hospital because he was hallucinating and doing some scary stuff. And what ended up happening is he never came out of the hospital, and he ended up passing away about a month later in a nursing home. And I had already started daily yoga practice at that point, thank goodness, because otherwise it would have been a complete wreck. But as we learned he was going to be put on hospice, I realized my boyfriend had not asked me how I was doing. And I thought, this is supposed to be the person who's my biggest support. What is going on that he's not checking in with me, right? So finally, I got up the courage to ask him, why haven't you checked in with me? Why aren't you making sure I'm okay? This is like a huge deal in my life. This is my father. And what he said to me, floored me. He said, "You told me not to ask you how you're doing. You told me that you deal with grief by yourself, that you prefer to go through your own process, grieve, heal in your own way, and that you would be fine." And I didn't remember saying that, but it sounded like words that I would say. And that was a huge turning point for me. Didn't change anything, but it was a huge turning point. So a few months later, after my father passed away, I realized I needed to do something differently. I needed to take a chance. So I chose to start training as a nurse coach. And I said this before, I know, but I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But a lot of the training was around mindfulness and slowing down and connecting with your body and your mind and just allowing. And I'll never forget, I was outside. This was early on in my coach training. I was doing some yard work, and I was, just thinking away, blah, blah, blah. And I had a light bulb moment. And I said, "Oh my God, I had a feeling." And that seems silly, but for me it was true. I never allowed space for me to feel what I was actually feeling. My automatic response was to shove it down and pretend it wasn't happening. And so what the feeling that I had, the realization, is that one of the things that I hate most in this world, and I don't use hate often, is being told what to do. There's nothing that gets me madder faster. So I was able to share that insight with my boyfriend. I asked if he would, not that he tells me what to do, but instead of saying those words and sharing a plan in that way, if he could ask me if I was okay with what he was planning and get me on board that way. And he didn't like that at first. He didn't want to have to beg, but that's not what I was asking him to do. So we had a conversation about that, and we came up with an agreement that worked for both of us, and that was a turning point for me. I was able to be vulnerable. I didn't know how he was going to react to that, and it changed our relationship. And as I've continued on this journey, our relationship has changed so much for the better because I've allowed him in. I realized I never let myself be loved. So, sorry, I'm getting emotional. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but things are much, much better. So if this is resonating with you, I just want you to know that I see you. I get it. But I also wanted to offer hope that there is a better way. And because I've been allowing people to see the real me slowly, I have built a beautiful community of supports around me. After I had surgery, I had so many more people checking on me than I typically would have. It was just a beautiful thing, and my heart is softening, and I just, as I continue through this work, I am excited to see what other things are going to change and grow, and the connections that I want to build. So yeah, it's okay to do things for yourself, but it's really not okay to allow no one to see you, to not allow people to help you when you need help. So anyway, thank you for listening to me ramble on. I hope it helped. I'd love to hear what's coming up for you, if it's helpful, if it's not helpful, if you're on board with this in any way. But either way, like I said, thank you so much for listening. I'm honored to have you along with this journey, and I'll talk to you soon.